It was just after sunset when the streets were starting to empty. Most people had gone home, wrapping up their workdays, and the sky was turning a soft shade of purple. In the quiet of the evening, Officer Carter cruised down the road, his eyes scanning the street ahead. He had been working the evening shift for hours, and while there hadn't been much action, he knew better than to let his guard down. Things could change in a heartbeat, and a good officer always stayed alert. As he turned the corner, something caught his eye. A red sedan sped by, its tires screeching against the pavement. It wasn't just a car moving fast, it was racing, the engine revving with more power than was needed for the residential street. Officer Carter felt his instincts kick in. Without thinking twice, he flicked on the sirens and followed the car, keeping a safe distance. The sedan weaved through the street, its headlights flashing in the rearview mirror of every car it passed. The officer's hand hovered over the radio, ready to call in the car's details if necessary, but he didn't want to escalate the situation just yet. This could be nothing, maybe a kid rushing to meet friends or someone just not paying attention, but then again, it could be more. A driver fleeing from something? A teenager who'd lost control? He made another turn, his patrol car closely behind. The red sedan took a quick left into a neighborhood. It wasn't the usual path people took, which only raised more red flags for Officer Carter. He hit the lights and pulled the car over. The sedan rolled to a stop just ahead of him. The officer parked his car a few feet behind, his eyes scanning the situation in seconds. The street was quiet. No other cars, no pedestrians, nothing unusual. Just the dim streetlights flickering overhead. Out of the car stepped a teenager. He was tall, maybe 17 or 18, with messy hair and an expression that looked more nervous than rebellious. As the officer walked toward him, he noticed the kid's hands, tight on the steering wheel, white knuckles. The teenager wasn't looking at him. Instead, his eyes kept darting back and forth between the officer's patrol car and the road ahead. Officer Carter reached the driver's side window and tapped lightly on the glass. The kid rolled it down but didn't make eye contact. "Evening, son," Officer Carter said, keeping his tone calm but firm. "Can I see your license and registration?" The teenager quickly fumbled through the glove box, clearly panicking. His hands were shaking and it was hard to miss. Officer Carter gave him a moment, but the kid was still struggling, his face flushed with anxiety. The officer tilted his head, trying to understand. A kid speeding wasn't uncommon, but the visible tension in this boy, it was different. Something was off. "I'm going to need your papers, buddy," Officer Carter repeated. "Yeah, sorry," the teen finally muttered. He handed over a crumpled piece of paper, his fingers still trembling as he extended it to the officer. Carter took the papers, his eyes lingering on the kid for a moment longer. The boy wasn't making eye contact. He was looking at the ground, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, and his breath was shallow, like he was trying to keep himself from panicking. Officer Carter raised an eyebrow. This wasn't just about a simple speeding ticket. Something was wrong. He glanced down at the papers and then back at the boy. He could feel the nerves rolling off of him. There was a slight hum in the air, a tension that made it feel like there was more to the story than just this traffic stop. "Everything okay, son?" Officer Carter asked, his voice softer this time. The kid hesitated. He licked his lips nervously, avoiding eye contact. Yeah, I'm fine," he said quickly. Officer Carter wasn't convinced. He crossed his arms over his chest, his gaze unwavering. Something about the way the boy's voice cracked, the way his posture seemed hunched like he was trying to shrink back, didn't sit right with him. The officer decided to ask the question he felt would get to the bottom of this. "Where are you headed so fast?" He wasn't trying to pry, but the more he looked at the teenager, the more he felt like there was a bigger reason behind the boy's actions than just speeding. The teenager hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously toward the end of the street. He seemed to be struggling with whether or not to answer. "Nowhere special," he said finally, his voice rushed. Just trying to get home." Officer Carter studied him for a moment. His eyes were sharp, catching every little movement. It wasn't the words that were getting him, it was the delivery. There was too much nervousness, too much hesitation. The officer felt a knot form in his stomach. He stepped back slightly, giving the kid space, but the tension didn't ease. "Home, huh?" Officer Carter said, his tone still calm but now probing. "You in a rush to get home?" The teenager nodded, his face turning slightly redder. "Yeah, I guess." But something about his body language, the way he was clenching his jaw, the way he avoided looking directly at the officer, spoke volumes. Officer Carter had been in enough situations to recognize when someone was hiding something. And this kid? He was hiding something, but what? The officer wasn't about to make any assumptions, but he wasn't going to let it slide either. He asked again, his voice steady but insistent. "What's going on, son? Why the rush?" The boy blinked rapidly and took a deep breath but didn't answer right away. Officer Carter could feel his patience thinning, but he didn't want to push too hard. There was always the chance that this was just an innocent misunderstanding. Still, his gut told him that wasn't the case. After a moment, the teen's shoulders slumped like he was giving in to something, and he spoke again, this time his voice lower, more strained. I'm trying to get home, okay? I can't be late." The officer nodded, still waiting for him to explain. The boy looked down at his hands again, his lips trembling slightly. "I have to get home to my mom. She's sick. I'm the only one who's here to take care of her. I just need to get back to her." The words hung in the air for a long second, and Officer Carter felt a shift inside himself. All at once, the tension between them seemed to change. The boy's voice cracked as he spoke, and it was clear that this wasn't just about a speeding ticket anymore. This was something bigger. The kid wasn't acting like someone late to a party or just driving without care. He was in distress. He was scared. The officer's gaze softened, his mind racing as he processed the information. A teenager speeding down the road in a panic, but why? Was it really just about getting home, or was there something else? Maybe his mom was really sick. Or maybe there was something more troubling going on. Officer Carter had seen it all before. The lies, the excuses, the panicked faces, but this was different. This kid didn't look like he was hiding behind a lie. He looked like he was hiding behind fear. "How bad is she?" Officer Carter asked quietly, his voice filled with concern. The boy didn't answer right away, but Officer Carter could see the struggle on his face. Finally, he muttered, "I don't know. She's not doing well, and I'm all she's got." That was enough to stop the officer in his tracks. The urgency in the boy's voice, the genuine panic, it all pointed to one thing. This kid wasn't just trying to escape a ticket. He was trying to get to someone who needed him. And that changed everything. Officer Carter paused, looking at the kid for a long moment. He knew he had a decision to make. He could continue to enforce the law, do his job by the book, and give the boy a ticket for speeding. Or he could listen to the fear in the teenager's voice, consider the situation, and maybe, just maybe, give him a chance to get home safely. The officer's eyes lingered on the teenager, the quiet street around them adding to the stillness. For now, he decided to hold back. But there was something in the back of his mind that told him this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next day, the world seemed to continue as usual. The sun rose, people went about their business, and life moved forward as it always did. But for Officer Carter, something was still lingering in his mind. The encounter with the teenager had left a mark on him, something he couldn't easily shake off. It wasn't just the situation itself, but the kid's eyes, his desperation, and the quiet plea for help that had hung in the air after their conversation. Officer Carter had seen countless faces over the years. He had written thousands of tickets, responded to emergencies, and dealt with people in all kinds of distress. But this was different. The boy wasn't just another person in trouble with the law. He was someone in the middle of a battle, fighting for his mom, trying to hold it all together even when it felt like everything was falling apart. And in that moment, Officer Carter had chosen not to add to his burden by issuing a fine. But as much as the officer tried to push it out of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder if the boy was really okay. The day passed slowly for the officer, the quiet hum of routine making it hard to concentrate on anything else. He had dealt with his usual set of tasks, responding to calls, patrolling the streets, and doing the usual rounds. But every time his mind wandered, it came back to the kid. What was going on at home? Was the teenager getting the help he needed? Was his mom okay? By late afternoon, Officer Carter couldn't stand the feeling of unease anymore. He knew it wasn't his job to get involved beyond the stop, but the kid's story had struck a chord with him. It was a feeling he knew well, the desire to help someone even when the law didn't require it. He had made a promise, after all. A promise to the teenager that he would drive carefully. But now Officer Carter was questioning if the boy had the resources to actually follow through. Had he really been able to handle everything on his own? With that thought in mind, the officer found himself driving back to the neighborhood where he had stopped the teenager. It wasn't that he expected to find anything alarming. He wasn't looking for trouble. But he felt like he needed to check in, just to be sure the kid was okay. Maybe, he thought, a quick check wouldn't hurt. As he approached the familiar street, he noticed the red sedan parked in the same driveway. But this time there was no sign of the teenager. No movement in the windows, no sound of a door opening. The house appeared just as quiet as it had been the night before. Officer Carter parked a few houses down, keeping his distance. He wasn't sure what he was hoping to see, but there was a nagging feeling in his gut that told him to stay just a little longer. Minutes passed, and still, there was nothing. No one walked by, no one came out of the house. The silence of the neighborhood hung thick in the air, almost like a weight. It wasn't unusual for the area to be quiet, but this felt different. It felt like something was being hidden beneath the surface. Finally, as he was about to leave, the officer saw a figure emerge from the house. It was the teenager, looking more tired than he had the night before. His eyes were sunken, his posture slouched, and his steps slow, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on him. He didn't seem to notice Officer Carter's car parked nearby. The boy walked down the driveway toward the sidewalk, his head down, and his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. He moved quickly, his steps purposeful but without the usual energy of a young person on the go. It was clear he wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere. The officer watched him for a moment, wondering what was going on in his life. Was the teen still struggling with his mom's illness? Did he still feel alone in all of this? Officer Carter had a strong urge to pull over and talk to him again, to ask if everything was okay, to offer some kind of help. But what could he really do? The law didn't provide answers for problems like this. What the teenager needed wasn't a ticket or a lecture, it was support. Real human support. And that was something Officer Carter couldn't provide on his own. As the teenager walked down the street, his head still lowered, the officer made a decision. He wasn't going to stop him, but he was going to try to help, in whatever small way he could. He had no idea if it would make a difference, but sometimes, just showing that you care could be enough to make someone feel like they weren't invisible. Officer Carter started the car again, slowly driving behind the boy. He kept a respectful distance, never getting too close, but always within sight. The teenager didn't notice him at first. He just kept walking, his shoulders hunched against the cold. But as they neared a small convenience store, the officer saw the boy pause and glance in the direction of the store's entrance. The officer parked across the street from the store and waited. He wasn't sure what the teenager was thinking or what he was going to do next. But he knew one thing. There was more to this story than just a speeding ticket. This kid was carrying a load that most people couldn't imagine. And the officer wasn't going to just drive away without knowing if there was anything more he could do. After a few moments, the teenager finally walked into the store. Officer Carter didn't move right away. He sat there in his car, watching through the window. He wasn't sure why he was so invested in this one situation. Maybe it was because he had seen too many young people make decisions out of desperation. Maybe it was because the teenager reminded him of someone he knew a long time ago, a person who had been so determined to do everything on their own, even when it was clear they couldn't. The officer stayed parked for a while, considering his next move. He had made a promise to the kid, after all. And that promise wasn't just about not writing a ticket. It was about making sure the teenager understood that he wasn't alone in this. There had to be something he could do, some way to help without overstepping his boundaries. Finally, he got out of his car and walked across the street, heading toward the store. He wasn't sure what he would say, but he knew he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. As he walked inside, he noticed the teenager standing by the counter, his shoulders still hunched, looking down at a small bag of chips in his hand. The boy didn't see him at first. Officer Carter took a deep breath and walked up to him, standing just a few feet away. He didn't want to startle him. The boy looked up in surprise, his face a little pale and worn. But when their eyes met, the officer saw something in those tired eyes, something that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he had made the right choice to stop by. "Hey there," the officer said, his voice calm and friendly. "I just wanted to check in. Is everything okay?" The teenager looked at him for a long moment. His face softened, and for a second, Officer Carter saw something that wasn't just fear or anxiety. It was relief. "A little bit of hope, Yeah," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm okay," Officer Carter smiled slightly. All right? Just making sure. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me, all right? The teenager nodded quickly, then turned away, paying for the chips before hurrying out of the store. Officer Carter watched him go, wondering what was really going on behind those tired eyes. The teenager may not have been ready to open up completely, but for just a brief moment it felt like maybe, just maybe, he had been seen. As Officer Carter made his way back to his car, he felt a strange sense of peace. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but sometimes just showing up for someone, even in a small way, could make all the difference. Sometimes the best way to help wasn't to fix the problem. It was just to let someone know they weren't alone. The days that followed felt like they moved in slow motion. Officer Carter went about his usual routine, patrolling the streets, handling calls, and responding to incidents as they came. But his thoughts were never far from the teenager he had seen a few days ago. The boy had left a mark on him, and the more time passed, the more he found himself wondering if he could have done more. It wasn't like he could just step into the teenager's life and fix everything. He wasn't a social worker, a counselor, or a family friend. His job was to uphold the law, to keep the peace, and to make sure people stayed safe. That was it. But what about the things that weren't so simple? What about the deeper struggles people faced that couldn't be solved with a ticket or a warning? As much as Officer Carter tried to push it out of his mind, there was a nagging feeling that wouldn't go away. The boy's eyes had said so much more than his words ever could. He had been scared, not just of the speeding ticket, but of everything else in his life. He had been carrying so much weight, and Officer Carter couldn't help but wonder if he was carrying it alone. That was the part that stuck with him. The loneliness. The officer had dealt with a lot of loneliness in his life. He had seen people who had no one to turn to, no family, no friends, no support. He had seen them fall apart under the pressure, their lives unraveling in front of them. But the teenager had seemed different. He had seemed like someone who was trying so hard to hold everything together. There was something in his eyes that made Officer Carter believe he was doing his best, even when things seemed impossible. And maybe that was what made him feel so connected to the kid, because he recognized that effort. A few days later, Officer Carter found himself on the same street again. He didn't know why he was there. Maybe he was just passing by, maybe it was a coincidence, but something in him urged him to drive by the boy's house once more. He told himself it was just part of his route, but he knew it was more than that. He still didn't know if he had done the right thing by letting the teenager go, but he had to see if he was okay. He drove slowly down the block, his headlights cutting through the quiet night. As he approached the house, his heart skipped a beat. There, parked in the driveway, was the red sedan. The car was still there, and for the first time in days, Officer Carter felt a sense of relief. He parked across the street again, just as he had done before, and sat there for a few minutes. The street was still as quiet as it had been the other night. No lights, no movement, just the soft hum of the night air. He wondered if the teenager was home, if he was okay, or if things had gotten worse since their last encounter. Officer Carter had been a cop for a long time, and he had seen enough to know that people's lives were rarely as simple as they seemed on the surface. Everyone carried something with them, something hidden deep inside that only they knew about. Some people carried anger, others carried sadness, and some carried fear. But whatever it was, it shaped them. It shaped the way they acted, the way they spoke, and the way they lived their lives. The officer thought back to the night he had stopped the teenager. The boy had been so focused on his mom, so desperate to get home to her. It had been clear that he was trying to protect her, trying to do everything in his power to keep things together. But what if he couldn't? What if he was too young to handle all the pressure? What if he needed help but didn't know how to ask for it? Officer Carter knew the weight of responsibility could break people. He had seen it happen to adults, let alone a teenager. But maybe that was why he felt so strongly about this. He had seen young people in tough situations before, and he knew what it was like to feel like you had to be everything for someone else, even when you didn't have the tools to do it. The officer took a deep breath and turned off his car. The night was still, and for a moment he let the silence wash over him. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but something told him that he needed to stay a little longer. It was then that he saw movement from inside the house. A figure appeared in the window, just a shadow at first. It was the teenager. He was standing there, looking out at the street, his hands pressed against the window pane. Officer Carter couldn't see his face, but he could tell the kid was deep in thought. lost in whatever was weighing on him. The officer felt a tug at his heart. He had wanted to leave the boy alone, to let him figure things out on his own, but seeing him like this, it didn't seem right. The kid needed someone to talk to. Not necessarily a cop, but just someone. A few minutes passed and the teenager pulled away from the window. Officer Carter sat there thinking, should he knock on the door? Should he offer help? What would he even say? He wasn't sure, but he knew he couldn't just leave it like this. Just as he was about to start his car and drive away, the teenager appeared on the porch. This time he wasn't looking out at the street. He was standing there, staring at the ground, hands shoved in his pockets as if lost in his own thoughts. Officer Carter felt an impulse that he couldn't ignore. He got out of his car and walked slowly toward the house, his footsteps light against the pavement. When he reached the sidewalk in front of the house, the teenager looked up, startled to see him standing there. He blinked, then quickly looked away. For a moment, neither of them said anything. It was as if the weight of the situation was too heavy to put into words. "Hey, I just wanted to check in," Officer Carter said, his voice calm and friendly. "I know things are tough. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but I'm here, just in case you need anything." The teenager didn't respond at first, but after a few seconds, he looked up at the officer. There was something different in his eyes now. Not as much fear, but more hesitation. He was still holding everything inside, but there was a flicker of something there, something like hope. "Thanks," the boy said quietly. I appreciate it." The officer smiled, trying to keep it light. "No problem. Just know you're not alone, all right?" The teenager nodded slowly, and for a brief moment their eyes locked. It wasn't a long conversation, but it was enough. Enough to let the teenager know that someone cared, that someone was paying attention, that he wasn't as invisible as he sometimes felt. As Officer Carter turned to walk back to his car, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He wasn't solving all the problems. He wasn't offering solutions to everything that was weighing on the teenager's shoulders. But he had done what he could. He had shown up, and sometimes that was all anyone needed. He got in his car, started the engine, and drove away. The night was still quiet and the world kept turning. But for Officer Carter, it felt like he had made a small difference. And that was enough.